Located in northern British Columbia, Prince George is a town typically known for its mining and foresting job opportunities. Within the town of 67,000 resides the family of Ronald and Doreen Jack, as well as their two children, Russell and Ryan. Sadly for the young family, fortunes had not been kind for Ronald, as he has sustained a terrible back injury while working on a sawmill, causing him to lose his job and go on welfare. Trying to find a new job, despite his new debilitating injury, was proving to be quite difficult for Ronald. And the pressure from not making ends meet while also trying to provide for his family of four was beginning to take a toll on him. Needing to clear his mind from all his troubles, he decided to walk a few blocks down the street to a local pub called the First Leader. While drinking at the bar and listening to music from the jukebox, Ronald began talking to someone, and this man would provide Ronald with the break he was so desperately needing. The man offered him a job that was located near Cluckul's Lake, which was 40 kilometers west of Prince George, driving a log truck. A driving job would be perfect given Ronald's current condition. Not only this, but his wife could also work as a line cook at the logging camp. And even on top of that, the logging camp also provides childcare, so Ronald and Doreen could work and not have to worry about their two sons while doing so. Upon hearing this, Ronald could not believe his fortune, as this was the perfect opportunity for him and his family. The only issue being, he did not own a vehicle, and so needed a way to get to the logging site with his wife and kids. The man, upon hearing this, offered to drive the Jack family to the campsite that very night. Amazed by the generosity of this man, he agreed, and went home to tell his wife. Later that night, around 11:15 p.m., Ronald called his brother, and after that his parents, about the job opportunity he had just received and accepted. He told them he would be out of town for around 10 to 14 days, but would come home just before school begins for the kids. At 1:21 a.m., August 2nd, all members of the Jack family were seen entering a dark four-wheel drive pickup truck and then drive into the night. To this day, it was the last time they were ever seen. After 7 years, no suspects or further information has come forward. Only a composite sketch and a description of a tall man with a reddish beard, wearing a baseball cap, a red checkered work shirt, faded blue jeans, and work boots. That is, until the 28th of January 1996, when an unknown man placed an anonymous tip to Vanderhoof Police Station, saying a brief but cryptic message. The Jack family are buried in the south end of Ranch. Before the dispatcher could even ask a single question, the caller promptly hung up. Unfortunately, the audio from that phone call was too distorted to decipher the key word that is missing. And although they were eventually able to trace the call to the small town of Vanderhoof, which is an hour west of Prince George, it is unclear whether the RCMP were able to apprehend or interview anyone, as there was a house party that night which had dozens of occupants at the time when the phone call was made. In the 36 years since the fateful night the Jack family hopped inside the 4x4 truck, that 10-second phone call remains the only lead that this case has ever had. Unfortunately, the case of the Jack family is all too similar to many other cases where Indigenous people go missing, as Prince George is located right at the bottom of the infamous Highway of Tears in British Columbia, a place where dozens of primarily women but also men have gone missing over the last few decades. Is the Jack family currently buried at the south end of some person's property in British Columbia? For the time being, the answer to that question will remain unsolved. Hi everyone. I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving this video a watch. I'm not sure if you're one of my subscribers, but it's been a long time since I've uploaded a video. Actually, almost a year. In fact, in that time, one of the serial killers from a video that I've put out about unsolved cases was actually apprehended and caught. I definitely plan to make more videos, and as you can probably see, I'm not the most talented or most creative person on YouTube for doing that, but it is something that I enjoy and want to keep doing. So in the comments, it'd be great to hear from you, what your thoughts are, what I can do to improve. I know I've had some comments earlier about sound mixing. I definitely plan to keep learning and keep improving, and hopefully put out content that a lot of people want to see. And so again, thank you so much for watching my channel. If you are a first timer, it'd be awesome if you liked and subscribed. No pressure though, but it is something that I want to continue to do and get better at in doing so. And now, back to the video. Jenny Sauter awoke in the night to the smell of smoke. She leapt from her bed and rushed out into the hall. Flames were trickling up the stairwell wall, crawling through the wooden frame. She screamed for George, her husband, who jolted awake and roused their sons. The house was going up fast in flames. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, George Jr., and John, escaped through the front door. But unfortunately, 5 of their other young children were trapped upstairs. Those children being 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jenny, and 5-year-old Betty. For it was Christmas Eve night, and they were allowed to stay up late by their mother. The fire had engulfed the stairwell, and the thick black smoke was bleeding out from every area of the house. George, acting full of adrenaline, sprinted to the side of the house where the ladder was usually kept, but it was missing. His heart pounded as he was trying to find a way to reach his children. He ran to his coal trucks, thinking he could back one of them up to the house and use them to climb in through the roof, but neither would start, though they had been just working that very day. The family screamed to the children upstairs, hoping to hear a response from them, but no voices answered, only the crackle of flames. George tried to scale the walls barehanded, but the fire was too intense, and it prevented him from climbing the wall. Frantic, Marion ran to a neighbor's home to call the fire department. The operator did not respond. Another neighbor tried from a nearby tavern. They were also unable to get through. Finally, someone managed to reach the fire chief, but he said he had to wait until someone could drive the truck over to their property. And unfortunately, by the time any fire brigade would arrive 7 hours later, the house would be completely gone. George and Jenny Sauter, as well as the rest of their family, were completely helpless to save their house and their children. This leaving their entire family, as well as every resident in Fayetteville County, West Virginia, completely devastated. An investigation would be conducted over what had happened, and it was initially ruled that the accident was caused by faulty wiring, causing a fire to break out. The investigation then began sorting through the ash and rubble for the deceased children. Men with shovels began digging, and this would lead to a discovery that would be the beginning of one of the greatest true crime mysteries of all time. No bones of any of the 5 children were found in the ruins of the Sauter home. This bombshell revelation would open up the door to countless possibilities. Suspicions of kidnapping began to circulate. Jenny began to recall the fateful night, and she would begin to recall oddities and certain events that had taken place that night. An hour before the fire began, Jenny received a phone call. And on this phone call, Jenny briefly spoke to an unknown female. The woman on this phone call was described by Jenny to be Laffy, and she could hear the clinking of glasses, indicating that the woman may have been at a party or at a bar. The woman on the call asked to speak to someone. Jenny had forgotten which name she said. Jenny told the woman it was a wrong number and hung up the phone, as the woman was still laughing on the other end. Theorists have speculated whether this was a genuine wrong number or some sort of diversion tactic used in the kidnapping of their children. After this, when Jenny was returning to bed, she noticed that the lights were still on and the curtains had not been drawn, which she thought was unusual at the time. And even more interestingly, later, when she had returned to bed, around 30 minutes after the phone call, she heard a distinct thump and then a rolling noise coming from the top of the roof. Hearing these noises was shortly before she noticed the smoke emanating from the halls. On the night of the fire, George also began recalling unexplained oddities that night. Why did both of his large trucks not start when he needed them to? As strange as this was, no conclusive evidence of tampering was ever found. However, the same could not be said about the tall ladder he couldn't find to help him climb the house. George always kept that ladder in the same spot, yet on that fateful night, it was gone. Strangely enough, the ladder would be found 75 feet away from the Sauter home in an embankment. Someone could have used that ladder to climb up the house and then remove it and throw it away when they had kidnapped the children. The telephone line, about 14 feet up the pole, had also been cut, and it was later determined to be intentional. Investigators began to suspect that more than just an accidental fire had taken place, and they started to take eyewitness testimony. A bus driver, who had just been passing through Fayetteville County, claimed he saw people throwing balls of fire onto the Sauter home from the road. Jenny later discovered a small rubber object in the yard, which could have been used as an incendiary device. A woman who saw the fire from a nearby hill said she saw several people in a car stop to watch the blaze before driving off later on. She would later claim that some of the Sauter children were in that car. Her account was never verified. A woman at the Charleston Hotel, 50 miles away, said she saw 4 of the missing Sauter children a few days after the fire. The children were walking with 2 men and 2 women, all of them of Italian appearance. She is quoted saying, "The whole party appeared guarded and silent. The children looked out of place and frightened." The detail of these people being Italian carried special significance to the Sodders, as George was of Italian lineage and was born in Sardinia, Italy, moving to the US as a teen. George had long been vocally opposed to fascism, especially the recently executed Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Many Italian immigrants had been pro-Mussolini before the war. This made George quite the polarizing figure in Fayetteville. Perhaps his bold anti-fascist rhetoric got him into trouble, which incentivized the events to happen. Further backing this theory up was an occurrence a few months before, when a life insurance salesman came to George's house a few months before the fire. When George refused his services, he became irate and warned George, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." George could very well have offended the wrong people, and perhaps even been in the crosshairs of the Italian mafia. The Sodder family and many investigators also noticed that the Italian community was very reluctant to talk or cooperate with aiding in the investigation. The Sodders felt a wall of silence which they could not explain. Even the police themselves seemed reluctant to investigate leads. The life insurance salesman who threatened George was never seriously looked into as a suspect. Years down the road, some of the townspeople opened up and admitted they found the original investigation to be suspicious. Now, an older Jenny Sodder, haunted by the lack of closure for her 5 missing children, walked to her mailbox, as was her normal routine. While sorting the letters, she came across a letter addressed only to her, and it had no return address, and was postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. What she found inside would be the single most interesting and mysterious piece of evidence in this case. For contained inside was a single photograph of a man who appeared to be in his late 20s, and a cryptic message on the back that reads, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. ILIL boys." And then a code reading A90132 or 35. Jenny immediately saw the resemblance of this man and her 9-year-old son she lost decades ago. This put a new fire into the Sodders, and George and Jenny quickly hired a new private investigator to track down the genesis of this letter. The now elderly George and Jenny Sodder waited on this private investigator to give new information. And they would wait. And they would wait. But mysteriously, they would never hear from him ever again. 2 years after receiving the letter, the 74-year-old George Sodder would pass away. Jenny Sodder would go on to continue the investigation. Every day she wore black to symbolize her unresolved grief. She also kept a billboard up on Route 16 near Fayetteville. It stayed up for almost 40 years. And after 44 years of searching, Jenny too would pass away. As of now, the case remains open but unsolved. No new news or updates have been made in decades.